Okay, today is November 23rd, and we're interviewing Benjamin Dunlap. And I take it you go by Ben.
I do.
All right. And I'm Marge Forster.
And I'm Barbara Bianca.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk to you today about your life and what you'd like to share with us about yourself. And specifically, when we get going, we really want to give you this opportunity to talk about yourself as part of the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, where did you grow up? Tell us about your start in life.
Sure. I was born in Lancaster County in 1957, December 23rd. My birthday's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. And the family I was born into had mom and dad and one sister who was 10 years older. My mom had a couple of miscarriages in between me and my sister. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived with us. And my sister and I didn't have a whole lot in common, and because she was so much older and so forth, in some ways I was kind of an only child, although that's the way it kind of felt. I mean, she was around, but we weren't really close. And a lot of that's the age difference, but we were pretty different people too. And she, to be frank, had some emotional issues, and lived her whole life with mom and dad until she died about 10 years ago of cancer. And anyway, but had a really good childhood and had a lot of fun and kids in the neighborhood and so forth, and nothing too extraordinary, except I did always kind of think I was different, growing up. I can remember being very young thinking, and not in a negative, bad way, but that I was different from mom and dad, somehow. And I couldn't, at that time really put any kind of characterization on that. But I also remember being 6 years old and really liking Virgil, and I forget the other guy's name on McHale's Navy. Should have been a clue. And I remember I would have recurring dreams about sailors as a 6-year-old. So, looking back, there were some, real big signs. But had, friends and guys and girls, and there was one family up the street who I was very close to, and it was a good childhood.
Were you in the city of Lancaster or out in the country?
Oh, no. It was a little town called Terry Hill, and it's in the northeastern part of the county, directly in between Lancaster and Reading. And very much farm, little town, little borough. It's near New Holland, and went to an elementary school there that we walked to school, and that was pretty cool. And across the street from us, in back of that house, were fields, Mennonite farms, and you'd smell the manure that they put on them and so forth. It was very Lancaster County, and it was pretty rural. And then I went to high school and had a little bit of adjustment at junior high, because from a little elementary school, one classroom each grade, and let's see. Else. In elementary school, one of the things, I had a lot of fun and would talk a lot. And I remember one thing that my second grade teacher put me up beside her because I was always talking to my classmates. And then when she put me up there, I was talking to her. So that was kind of funny.
So how long? Where did she put you next?
I think she just dealt with it. So let's see. Then. Junior high, made friends, and there was one friend in particular, and who was very close, and that's when I realized I was gay. Mm-hmm. Going through puberty and everything, that's when it really hits us.
And so what did you do with that realization? How did you,
it was pretty hard. I remember thinking it was a phase, and at the time, that boys would go through, at that age and so forth, and but in other boys, it was a phase, but for me it wasn't, and and that was really hard. That was really hard. And I remember thinking, you know, when you know, my friends, my one friend in particular showed interest in girls, and I wasn't really interested in girls in that way. You know, friends, of course, but not in the way that they were, and having girlfriends. It really hit me very hard. And that's when I first realized that, you know, that I was different. And I can remember, I was very sad for a while, and then you know, actually thought about suicide at the time, and, you know, as a way out, thinking that how could I ever be like that? And
Was there anyone you could talk to at that time?
no, nobody.
Was there a church involvement as part of your?
No, and in fact, later on, the church was actually very unhelpful. But if you want me to go chronologically, I'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get to it later.
Yeah, but I just kind of tried to push it out of my mind, and thinking that, you know, I guess I still thought I would grow out of it or change, you know, but it was seeming like I wouldn't. And then I got through high school, and that's fun too. I mean, it wasn't all, you know, sad. There were a lot of good times too, and had friends, and was in, did plays and so forth and other things, and there were a lot of good times. But, and had a group of friends I was close to. But then after high school, went to college, and it was a similar thing. I mean, I did went to West Virginia University and did well. And first year didn't even have to study real hard, and had a lot of fun and with friends. But also, you know, here again, I knew I was different, and you know, I went to see a counselor there. They had counseling for students, and saw him pretty much the whole time I was there. And you know, and he was trying to help me to be straight, but not in a way like conversion therapy, weird way, but just like he thought I was a regular guy, and, you know, that I just had these fears or something, and, you know, of women and dealing with them and so forth, and talked to him a lot about that and other stuff. And it got to the point where, like at the end of college, my last summer, I had an internship in New York, and I actually was dating a very nice woman who was a couple years older than me, and worked at a magazine there. I was in journalism, and journalism major, and had an internship at a magazine, and it was a great summer, a fabulous experience, and dated her, and, you know, came time to, you know, possibly take it to the next step physically, and I just wasn't interested. And I felt bad because I really liked her as a person, but it just wasn't me. And then I went out and, you know, hooked up with somebody, and with a guy, and thought, you know, I wasn't satisfied with the anonymity of it, if you will, but otherwise I knew it was right. And then I still, you know, went back to college and finished up, and had a hard time with that part. Again, I had, you know, there were good times. I was on the student newspaper and writer, and was fairly well known around school, and for things I'd done and I was doing, and you know, had friends, but there was this part of me that just, you know, I couldn't. At that point, I knew I was gay, but I didn't know what to do about it.
Right. So you had a confirmation of, you know, who you were, but you didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I acted on it in a more adult way, you know, as far as the sexual feelings and sexual, you know, encounters, but didn't know what to do with it. And then graduated, went home, lived at home for a while until I found a job that I could go out and get an apartment. And then when I did, I met some people. I was in Lancaster and met some people there, And I remember one of the guys who I became friends with, and he was a boyfriend for a short time, but then we were just friends. He worked at a hotel in town, and he was out not only to his parents, but at work. And this was in the early 80s. And to me, that was like a revelation. Like, I'd never even thought I could be out to family or, because whatever I was doing up to that point was very furtive. I, didn't tell my friends or anybody. And so that helped. And here again, I needed some help with saw a counselor who, straight guy, who was just a great guy, and was really good about helping me to become more comfortable with myself and deal with this. And he was very good at I think he had said it, but maybe it's somebody else at the time. But becoming comfortable with yourself and your sexuality is like peeling away at an onion, and it's like a layer at a time. It's not like, oh, I'm going to come out to my parents and everything is great, or because I know people now who it's amazing. They're my age and they're out. The one guy in particular is a very high level job down in Philadelphia, and he's out to his parents and his friends and everybody, and he was married and divorced, but he's afraid to be out at work. So it goes on. It's funny. So, but it was a real process of getting comfortable with myself and who I was, and it was really ongoing for a long, long time, and in some ways, up until now, because I'm much more open, with I'm an attorney, and much more open with clients. Either I'm very open with them, or I never haven't done anything to make anybody think I'm anything than who I am. I might not talk about it openly with everybody. You don't need to, but it's been a process there too, deciding, in other words, who to be open with and who not, and how much,
So, do your other partners in the law firm know?
Oh yeah, they've been fabulous. When I first started and was an associate back in '92, I worked for, going back, I skipped a lot in between there, but going back in that regard, as far as the law firm, when I first started, there were two older guys who were, well, one was homophobic and one was just unaware, a little bit ignorant. And they would say things, and I would, I hid from them who I was. And eventually got to the point where, when I was going to become a partner, I came out to them and said, I don't want this to be an issue, and was open. And they were great. I mean, the one guy who was homophobic had just retired. He was gone. And the other guy who was just a little bit, I say ignorant, and I just mean that in a more unaware way. He was great. He was one of my mentors eventually, and just very supportive, and he just became a great guy. He died a couple of years ago. It was just a great guy, very supportive. And the other guys too, after I was a partner for a couple of years, we'd hired this guy who was a fundamentalist Christian, and they were, there was talk about whether or not he was homophobic and so forth. And one of my partners said, well, we can't have that. We just have to go to him and talk to him about it and ask him and say, if you have a problem with this, that we can't put up with that. And he said, and I'll go to him and I'll talk to him, and I won't tell him which one of us it is. So that was really cool. And it's a small one.
So he did do that?
Yeah, he talked to him, and the guy, he wanted to stay there, and whether he was smart enough to say he didn't have a problem. And I think on a lot of levels on personal level he didn't, but I think his religion told him it was wrong, and so forth, and I still had that. that was that. But going back, you know, in dealing with it, who I am, I remember during the time that I lived at home with my parents and was struggling, that I did go to minister. And I was a little vague. I didn't say I'm gay, but I said, you know, if he was aware at all, you know, people don't come to you and ask about being gay unless, you know, they think that they are. It's just kind of natural. But I did, and he just said, well, gay people are going to hell. And, you know, that's what I dealt with. And that certainly didn't help things.
Then did you stop going to the church?
Yeah, it was a church I was brought up in, and yes, I did stop.
And did your family question why you stopped?
Well, it was around the same time that, I mean, I was post-college, and they weren't going to tell me, you know, they weren't telling me what to do anymore or anything. And so I just went. And for a while, I went to a church in Lancaster and talked to the minister there. It was a Lutheran church, and the guy there was he was very nice, but he was also very, don't tell anybody, you know, because the church was not open at that time. He was very cool, very supportive, but, you know, it was just the times. It was in the 80s. And coming out, too, at the time that I did, when I was in Lancaster, I worked at the newspaper for a couple of years and had some other part-time jobs after college. And you know, it was also the time that AIDS was coming in, so there was that scary part, too. And you know, I was finally starting to accept who I was, and then there was this big fear on top of it. And so that just added to the challenges.
And your family, are you out to your family?
Yeah, and it was a process, and it was funny because I lived in Lancaster for 2 years, and then got a job in Allentown. I worked for Rodale Press for 6 years, and doing magazine publicity, and it was a fun job, and had a lot of, you know, it was a great experience. And I came out to my bosses there, and they were very supportive. 2 women, they're fabulous. I'm still friends with them today. And it was out to a lot of people work. It was more, you know, it was kind of a little bit of a hippie place still at the time, and there were a lot of people who were very supportive. But then there were some who were, you know, homophobic too. I remember there was one guy in particular, a young guy, and I always thought that he was probably gay himself and couldn't deal with it. Was my thinking, but you know, so there was it's ongoing challenges there too. But overall it was good. Overall it was good. I mean, I never had a really terrible experience. I was never, you know, there's some name calling. That was about the worst. And, you know, that's not easy. And I mean, a lot of it was, most of my issues were the broad societal, you know, problems or looking down upon gays, and when I was growing up and so forth, and me taking that internally. It wasn't, I didn't have a lot of stuff directed to me personally. Outside of that, it was more the broad things going on.
You were seeing it in a broader society.
Yeah.
And how it applied to you.
Right, and back then there was nobody that, you know, that no role models or anything. You know, the first time I can remember anything, any, you know, positive portrayal of gays was on, what was it called, Mary Hartman, with Billy Crystal, where he played, he was a gay son. And that was the first. There weren't many. I think it was a long time after that until there was another. And I mean, all the media portrayals were fairly negative. Even movies like Boys in the Band, you know, were a lot of self-loathing in it. And
So your family then, was it the
oh,
same
yeah.
time frame?
So anyway, when I was at Rodale, I worked there for 5 years, and then when I was 29, I got cancer. And but you know, yeah, it was hard, but also I say I'm glad I did, because I was lucky I got through it, and it wasn't as far as what some people put up with. I mean, I had an operation, radiation, and so forth, and you know, that was a very scary time. But it also woke me up, and that it got me to think, hey, life isn't forever. And it got me to take some chances that probably would have taken me years to take otherwise. And it was funny because within a year after I had cancer, I both found my life partner and you know, enrolled in law school and started that. So it just got me to make some big changes, and they were both very positive.
Great.
Yeah. So when I got together with David, who we've been together now since 1989, no, 88, we've been together. And when I was going to start law school, he said that, I looked at Dickinson and Temple, and he said if you go to Dickinson, we could get a place, you know, somewhat in between. He was working in Lancaster, and was on the road a lot too. And he said somewhere in between Carlisle and Lancaster, and you know, we could get a place together. And so we did that, and it's at that point is when it hit my dad. That, I mean, I think he knew that I was gay, but it really hit him. And you know, that was hard for him, and it took a few years, you know, for him to accept it. And it's funny, you know, that I never said to them, well, I've said to my mom a lot of times in recent years about being gay and talked, you know, used those terms, but for a lot of years I didn't use the terms, but they knew that I was together with David and so forth. And it was, we were a very close family, and until it was a certain, in the first couple of years, they still wanted me to do everything with them on holidays. And it got to the point where I had to say, you know, well, I need to do things with David's family too. And I said, just like my cousins and their husbands, you know, have to. And that's when it was like they had an aha moment. And
So you never really said, I want you to know I'm gay.
yeah,
You just let it gradually dawn on them.
Exactly. That's the way I did it. And so what's very interesting is then, you know, where Dad and came to really, Dad and Mom came to really love David, and Dad died about 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, and he had Alzheimer's, and at the end, the last 2 years weren't good, but he, at one time, towards the end, he said about David, he said, I think of him as another son.
Uh-huh.
And it's so sweet.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's, you know, it's very interesting how things change. If people have open hearts, if they aren't, you know, hateful or prejudiced, people change. And, you know, we have to give each other a chance to do that.
Yeah, I think my favorite slogan is be careful who you hate. It might be someone you love.
That is good.
Well, it sounds like things are moved right along. So you were in law school, you got to law school, and now you're in Elizabethtown and working in Harrisburg. And where's David working now?
He was with Isaacs for a long time, and about he left there about 6 years ago, and he took a sabbatical for a while, and he now has a concrete countertop business.
Concrete?
Yeah, called Sunworks. So that's what he's doing right now. And
So have you taken the step with marriage?
oh yeah, we're
Okay,
married. Yeah.
great.
We got married in December 7th. It'll be 2 years, and we went up to New York before Pennsylvania was legal, and a good friend of mine from my Rodale days got one of those online minister's licenses and married us, and we just had it was very small. It was she and her husband, they have a place in Brooklyn, and we did it at their house, and my cousin who lives in New York came over too, so it was the 5 of us, and we went out to dinner, and we were up for a long weekend, had a great New York weekend, saw a lot of shows, And it's funny, on the day that we got married Saturday night, December 7th, that during the day we saw a play at the theater for a new audience, Midsummer Night's Dream. And I thought it was really appropriate to see that day, because it has a marriage in it, and it also has fairies. So, so I thought that worked, but that was fun. And so that was really nice. And then we had a big wedding reception when we got back in Lancaster, and had 150 people at a hall. A friend of David's, who has Old Greenfield Inn, has a place at the Old Hamilton Watch Company, their ballroom. We rented that. It was really, really nice.
Was your sister able to be there?
No,
Or
she
was
died
already
10 years
gone?
ago.
Oh, 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, but Mom was there, and she was great, and had a good time, and yeah. She's still, she lives in a retirement community. Has independent living, and it's very conservative. And she's great with us, but she asked that we didn't tell others there. Although everybody, Dave and I come down and so forth, but she, just asked that we didn't talk about it openly and so forth. So that's still out there,
Yeah.
But yeah, and one of the things, I guess, because of the times that I lived in and so forth, and I had one of my, I call my gay mentor, was this guy who's a professor at Kutztown University, died a few years ago, and Paul Kendall, and he and his partner, and they were never able to get married, were together for 58 years. They got together back in the 50s in New York during the McCarthy era, and Paul Reeder worked at the Friends School in New York, and he was a teacher there, and Paul Kendall was a professor at Kutztown, and they had a place in Berks County, and Paul Reeder would come down every weekend. Anyway, and especially Paul Kendall, were really great mentors about how you can have a relationship, because I didn't know. Well, I knew a lot of gay people back then when I was first coming out. I didn't know too many that were in relationships for any period of time. That was back then not the norm. And it was hard, because there was a society everything was trying to push you apart, or keep you from having relationships. And I said, looking back, that it was kind of ironic that one of the things that was thrown at gay people at that time was that, we weren't capable of having long-term relationships. It wasn't in our makeup. And then when we wanted to get married, they didn't want us to. So it's funny. So he had started a gay organization in Allentown called Lehi. He was one of the founders of it. And it had actually started in the 60s, a year before Stonewall. And it was kind of an outgrowth of the Mattachine societies and those early organizations along those lines. And so I got involved with that when I was there, because I thought it was a way to meet nice people, and it was, and I met them, and I got involved. I was an editor of the newsletter for a while, and then I sold ads for a while, and did things like that to be involved in the community. And it was actually helped to start a community center there, and it failed for several reasons. One was it was the beginning of the AIDS crisis, and it really hit. When that hit, everybody's attention, and rightfully so, went to that. And so the support for the center that was there in the beginning just dried up and was diverted elsewhere. But also I learned some lessons too, that you really have to have a plan, and you also have to have paid staff, because they were trying to do it with volunteers, and it just was too much. I mean, even though Paul Kendall at that point was retired and was doing a lot, it was just too much. You really need paid staff. And so I took those lessons, and when I came here, and I was involved in the community, and a friend of mine who's a fellow attorney, Tish Frederick, who now is from and went back to New Mexico. She and her partner at that time, they lived in Harrisburg for about 5 years while her partner was doing her postdoc work at Hershey. Tish was very involved, and she had the idea to raise money for gay causes and to start FAB. And so she did the first couple of them, and she asked me to become involved, and I did. And then after that was done for a couple of years, Candy Free, who was with them working at the at what was then the Greater Harrisburg Foundation, is now TFEC, Foundation for Enhancing Communities, came to me and said that she had this opportunity with this national gay and lesbian funding partnership, a national one, that would link up with community foundations to raise, and we could raise $100,000. That if we raised $100,000, it would be matched dollar for dollar by this foundation. And so we kind of took that on and used FAB as a vehicle to do that. And one of the ways, one of the conditions for getting the money was that we had to do a needs assessment. And we got it's called the Cultural Partnership. I don't think I quite have the name right. But anyway, we got them to do the needs assessment. And what really struck me at the time was across the board, ages, old, young, in between, male, female, gay, lesbian, transgendered, professional, not, the thing that everybody said that this area needed was a community center. And so I really took it upon myself to try to get that up and running, or to be a force in it, because to be a force in trying to make it happen. And got together with some other people, Wayne Caddick, Greg King, and Ted Martin, and we were the steering committee for this, and got the initial group together for a board and so forth. And it took a while. It was a very slow process, and because I was thinking myself, it's better to do it right than to do it fast. But also it was hard to get the interest, and to get enough people together with the interest to realize that this could happen. And one of the very best things that we did early on is we hired Lehi as I forget what his title was at that time. It certainly wasn't executive director, but it was somebody to do work to help to start this, and to do mailings for fundraising, and to initial programming and so forth. And it took off from there. It was a very slow process, and it was very scary at times, because we were initially a project of the foundation, and then we rented space from them, and Lehi had an office, and that worked well. And I think that we were able to make Lehi a full-time employee before we moved him out of there. And then we moved over to St. Stephen's, and got more and more people involved, and more people in the community who started to believe in this. And it was rough, and that we had some at times, and one of the executive directors that we had just didn't work out at all. We made this national search, and we had gotten a grant from the state. Ed Rendell was governor then, and gave us a nice grant through Ted and his connections. And we spent the money for the search, and for the seed money for this executive director, and she just crashed and burned in like 6 months. And we had other people, another employee who was decent but wasn't quite right. And all the time, Lehi was there and growing, and learning new things. And he was involved with Common Roads, with I think initially with just being the I guess you call it monitor or whatever for the evenings sessions and so forth. the get-togethers that they had. And, and then Common Roads came to us about merging, because in some ways we were competing for some of the same money, and we thought, it was their suggestion, it was a very good suggestion about merging, and we explored that and did so, and that helped to strengthen the organization, and it just kept growing. And the programming part, Lehi was always great, and there were other people involved who were great, and other projects have grown out of it, like the History Project, and Barry's, Loveland's been great about getting that up and going, and overseeing it and so forth, and the Elders Project, and I just went off the board at the end of last year after being there from the beginning, one of the founding members, and I felt a little satisfied going off. It was definitely time, because you need new people, and same people shouldn't be there forever, and I wanted to do some different things anyway, but I felt really good when I left, and the last couple of years I was really working to help it to become stronger financially. We got an endowment in place, an endowment fund, which is, for an organization this size, is an okay size. It needs to grow, but it helps. And some of the fundraising, the membership campaign, and so forth, I felt very strongly about that, and that's been a way of bringing in some more steady income, which is what we need. And so that's where I really put my efforts the last couple of years.
Well, great, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it was a labor of love.
Are there any other extracurricular activities that you enjoy, other than helping with the center?
Well, you mean in the community?
Yeah.
Oriented?
And hobbies, anything about yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, right now I'm on the creative board. I'm on the executive committee, and I'm really enjoying that. That's been great fun. And let's see, hobbies, like to yoga, like to ride bike, like to read, do things with friends, travel.
You've described a lot of change in your own life in terms of coming to terms with who you are, and your family coming to know who you are, and your relationship with David. Where do you think, what more changes do you think we need to see? What challenges are still out there?
Oh boy. Yeah, in some ways youth have it easier. Yeah, it's never easy to be an adolescent, whether you're gay, straight, or whatever. But I think also, in some ways, it's probably harder too, because they have more attention on them. Like maybe they could have more role models and so forth. But people are more apt to, look at them as being gay and think of that. I think that unless you were really people, when I was growing up, it was being gay, male gay was associated with being effeminate. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't effeminate, nobody thought you were gay. So, and I think so now, if, just when people are out, that has a whole new set of challenges and possibilities too, and it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. I'm really, glad that things have changed as much as they have. And I look at, back that, people like Paul, who were my parents' age, if they hadn't done what they did to, try to change things, it wouldn't have been easier for me. And, and if me and other people of my era hadn't done what we did, things would be better now. That's all of us in all realms of life, not just in this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it just really points out the importance of the History Project, because, so much was hidden, and it's, these really important lives can now be acknowledged, and there's still a way to go, but I think it is positive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of good stuff. More needs to be done, but lots of good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Not that I can think of, no. Any other questions?
I guess I'm wondering, what else you think needs to be done? What do you foresee on the horizon that you would like to see?
Oh, boy.
Maybe if you can, even with the center, if you can share what some of the vision is for this organization down the road, as well as broader societal issues.
Well, the center, I think it's to continue, I mean, to do the good work and to grow it. I mean, like things like having the gay straight alliances in the schools, I just think that is so important, so important. And because that's, I mean, not everybody can come. Common Road is fabulous, but not everybody can make it to Common Roads. And you know, if you live in where I was brought up, for instance, even though it's a center service area, I would have had no way to get to even to Lancaster for something like that. You know, they have sessions in Lancaster, and if you're not out and you can't tell somebody, you know, if you're lucky enough to have parents that, you know, you can tell and support and are supportive of you at that age, but not everybody does. So having it in the high schools where you can just go after school and so forth, I think that's great. And just to continue and to be, you know, in a broader sense, you know, the things we've started to be, you know, part of, to be families and to make our own families and so forth. I just think that's really great because I'm very lucky. My family has been, and I'm talking about my extended family, don't have any siblings anymore, but my cousins and so forth have all been supportive, and they've been great. And it's took a while, and a lot of that was because I didn't feel I could tell them. But once I did, and we talked about it, they were all great. And so, you know, but in some ways we make our own families too. Like I have some friends and female and male that I think of as, you know, like siblings, so they're great.
And is David's family nearby?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah. And they're very, David was very open with his family very early, so he had a very different experience in that regard. He was more independent at an earlier age, you know, with what was going on with his life and his family. So.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. This has been, it's been fun. You made it very relaxing and enjoyable.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.